All right. We had technical difficulties earlier. I was using the screen share method, the new screen share method on Facebook, and you can see the video was playing kind of choppy, but it was getting through. But it's it was there was no audio. You couldn't hear the audio. So get this situated. I know everyone's out enjoying their New Year's and different things like that. So I'm not expecting people really to show up. But if you show up, just have a seat. I'm going to go over the top 10 videos. I went over 20 through 11. So today will be the top, the remaining 10. I think it's important, the reason I'm doing this, it's a lot of content, some of it local, some of it national, and, hey, no one else is going to really cover it, so we got to make sure we give it the proper attention it deserves, So I'll wait like another 30, 40 seconds. This may be the last video for 2017. I may do another one. I'm not sure. So got a lot I want to get out. But I do want to learn how to use the screen share method. That way I can give like my own commentary, on videos, and if people have questions or anything like that. So I definitely want to figure that out. It's probably going to take a little bit of trial and error to, figure that out, how to share the screen where it plays good and where you can hear it at the same time. So I know you can use OBS or something, but I really was running low on time to set up. So I'll wait another 15 seconds and we'll get started. Okay, so the first video we'll talk about is the number 10 video was the professional sports team in the city being robbed of its resources from sports teams. This was during the NBA Finals, during Game 2 of the NBA Finals. And I went downtown, basically I talked to everyone there. When you see the video, you'll see that there's people from Berlin, Germany. There's people from all over the world, Australia, all over the country, all over the world. So when you research it, like there's a lot of, and this has been going on for a few decades, where they say stadiums are bad investments. And the teams like the LA Rams and a few other teams, they're still paying for those teams 30 years later. It's basically taking a mortgage out when you get these stadiums and different things like that. Like the Brown Stadium, there was controversy that the new stadium that was built here when the team came back in 1999, that it should have been a dome. And it wasn't a dome. And, they basically just use it for football for the most part. So, football is only September, October, November, December. They're not making the playoffs, so a good 4 months. So for 8 months, there's no other way to bring in revenue. So we spend all of this money on football teams and jerseys, cookouts, tailgating, different things like that. It's not bringing any money into the community. And downtown is being built. If you look at like when the city is being gentrified, we covered this briefly in the mixed income video, where if a city is being gentrified, then there might be like a new stadium like Atlanta. I think they're gonna get built a new stadium, near the stadiums, of course, are always near downtown. It's being gentrified and there's a stadium, you know what I mean? So it's just, there's just certain things that occur when you see this happening. So the premise of that video is basically, I go downtown during the NBA finals at the Cavs Arena, and I did what is called a contingent evaluation method. And during this method is basically the value that you assign to anything. It doesn't have to be, it can be anything that you have value on. Whatever, are you willing to pay the cost of that value? So most people are unaware that they pay taxes annually for their stadiums. It can range from $25 to $100. I think in San Francisco, they pay like $100 or $75 a year for that stadium. Whether you go to the game or not, it's tax money. So the premise was, how much would you pay? I don't say, well, if you're a fan of this team, you're paying this much or this much. So it was generally a $25 to $100 range. Some people were saying that they would pay $1,000 a year. Most people honestly said that they wouldn't pay anything. So it's a very interesting, the reason it's number 10 is because most people, we blindly follow sports. We blindly follow, some things we give our attention to. We don't really notice how much we don't really care about it, even though we give it our attention, our undivided attention. So when I went to the NBA finals and I spoke to people from all over the world, all over the country, they were basically saying that, I like my sports team, I root for this team, but I'm not going to pay any money. I'm not going to pay any tax money. And these teams make billions and millions and billions of dollars, and it doesn't go back into the community. So, yeah, they may have little events like a Boys and Girls Club or different things like that, but it really doesn't go back into the community. It's just, and we keep giving the money to these sports arenas, these sports teams. So when I went down to their, during the NBA finals, and I asked people, how much would you pay to keep your team here? Because we all pay taxes. I didn't tell them that they pay in taxes, but it's just a question. That's why it's called the contingent evaluation method. And most people said they wouldn't pay anything, but they're fans of these teams. We give all this energy to sports. So that's why I said, well, let me go downtown, ask different people, how much would you pay to keep your team? Most people said nothing. So that's why that video is number 10, is because you're not going to see a video like that online where, it's really probing deep into the psyche of a sports fan or people in general. And I think you should take that analysis as far as like, how much do you really value something? And, just how much would you be willing to pay for it to keep it? And if you're willing to pay, if what you're willing to pay is less than what it's actually worth, then you don't value it as much as you think you do. So that video was number 10. Number 9 is the Facebook killer video, the Facebook killing that happened earlier this year. I can't remember which month, but we went to the site where it happened. We did about 5 different videos, and the main video that was number 9 is just the eyewitnesses. We spoke to people that saw the Facebook killing. We spoke to people that heard it. Some people were asleep. The gunshot woke them up. Some people heard the car drive off. People were saying they were just in a house. And people were saying that a young child, like 5 years old, he heard it and seen it. He said, they just killed my dad. found out his dad was killed. And, you know, it was a lot of elders that I spoke to during that time frame. And the elders were basically saying, you know, we want the community protected. We want the men to step up and protect the community. So when I did that video was number 9, because after that, the shooting happened. I don't know, just people in the energy of the city. A lot of people didn't want to come out. A lot of people felt, you know, caged in their homes. People were looking for them, and, you know, they were wondering, was he still in the city? Did he get out the city? Excuse me. So that's number 9. It was a national story, but I went there. The main thing that upset me about the Facebook killing was that how people were saying that it was a conspiracy. It didn't happen, or his blood, you know, they had the memes of the gentleman's blood. They were saying it should have been spilled this way, and it should have been, you know, it should have came out this way if he really got shot. But and people were disagreeing with me, and I was putting these videos out, and I said, you know, this actually happened. Like, I went there. I was there. I went to the scene. I went to the vigils. I spoke with people of his family, his sons, people that loved him. So, and that's a problem with the social media, is that people feel that they're an expert. Like, how can you be more credible? I don't know. People watch CSI and stuff, and I guess they figure that they're more credible than, not more credible, but that they have the knowledge of someone that works in these fields, when, you know, just from watching TV or anything. So that's a whole different story. So that's number 9, the Facebook killer. Number 8, the 14-year-old protesting his 5-year-old sister's death. Him and his family members had warned Children Protective Services of basically that his sister wasn't being treated right. They should go check on her. They should do something. And they neglected it, and she was beaten to death. She had died. So his sister had died. He's 14 years old. She was 5. And he protests. He led a protest in front of the CPS building. So that's what that video is about. And it was very encouraging to see a young man, 14 years old, to protest his sister's death. She was 5 years old, and I think he said she died right in front of him. And he didn't seem depressed about it. He didn't seem weird about it. He just seemed, you know, he wanted justice for his 5-year-old. So, for his sister. So that video is number 8. I think that's kind of self-explanatory. You know, he's a young activist in the making, basically. Number 7 is the Casket Crusades. That took place in Akron, East Cleveland, and downtown Cleveland. And I went to, the footage I have is just of East Cleveland and downtown Cleveland. And, you know, this is not a Christian-based channel. I'm not a Christian, but, you know, being a amateur journalist, whatever, I decided to cover it. It's where they basically carry caskets. The church is carrying caskets, and they're telling people to get off drugs, get off heroin, and they're on a bullhorn, and it's just talking about the word of God, basically. So I'm not a Christian or anything, but it was an interesting march. I think we marched about 50 streets, both weekends. It was for a few hours. And it's just interesting. We hear about, you know, the church not doing much, the church not coming out. So that was one of the few times they came out in large numbers that I've seen. So that's why that video is number 7 for the top videos of the year. The number 6 video is the Muslim ban. I spoke to 2 refugees from Somalia, and one of them was a refugee for almost 25 years. So he spoke about, living in the refugee camp growing up basically there, like you're growing up in a refugee camp. And I spoke with someone from the Council for American Islamic Relations. That's the CAIR group here in Cleveland. And he spoke about the vetting process. And he basically said, like, there's only 1 out of 100 people that gets chosen. And, in these Muslim countries to even come over here is mostly women or children. And basically he was saying that the screening process to even come over here as a Muslim, you don't really even need a Muslim ban because it's so strict. So I gave not only that perspective, but I wanted to give, the Black perspective. How does this ban affect Black people? So I spoke to, like I said, 2 Somalian immigrants. They were refugees for over 25 years. And one of them spoke about one family that was at the camp for over 30 years. And they were about to leave to come here. And then they got word about the Trump Muslim ban, and it stopped everything. So that video is number 6 because when we think of the Muslim ban, we think of Yemen, we think of, basically the Middle Eastern countries. We don't really think, nobody really talked basically how the Muslim ban affected Africa, because the majority of Muslims are not Middle Eastern. And I broke down that ban of the countries even more, where when you look at the Muslim countries that were banned, it was not the most dangerous countries were not banned, but they make a lot of money. Like Nigeria, they have their, how they kidnap the women and different things like that, but they have a lot of oil. So it was just things like that. So that video was number 6 on the list because it was just a different perspective on the Muslim ban. The number 5 video on the list is the first week of the NFL protests, where we went downtown to the Cleveland Stadium and basically kneel for Kaepernick, protests, get people to kneel. First week of football. It's a big rivalry between the Browns and the Steelers. So the Steelers were here. People were, emotional. So if you followed the channel from the beginning, one of the things we talk about the most is that you'll see that sports brings out the racism like no other, like nothing else. Like sports is basically one of the main things where it brings out the racism in white people. So when we cover this protest on the week 1, you'll see these Browns fans, you'll see, we're getting the middle finger, just all kind of different craziness and madness. And we're saying that, when the Browns, you cheer for the Browns when they score touchdowns, you want them to win, but when they want justice, you don't like the Browns anymore. It's like they're only good for your entertainment. So it was just, they were trying to show support for the Browns, trying to, when the Browns, because the Browns was the first team to have the white player to kneel, if you remember. Then they were the first team to kneel as a collective, and that was during the preseason. So during the first week, they said, hey, we got to come out, support them, Kaepernick, and we got to kneel. So that video might be I think that's the funniest video. I know it's a serious topic. I'm just being honest. Just because if you look at our, I covered the Cleveland Indians World Series, the Cleveland Indians opening day. So the World Series from last year, the opening day from last year, and you just see the racism, is pretty blatant. Like no matter what sport it is, and the Cleveland Indians, of course, the Chief Wahoo logo and different things like that. So number 5 is So let me recap. 10 is the Cleveland Cavs robbing the downtown of their resources, asking people how much they value their team. Number 9 is the Facebook killing. I went to the scene and people that saw it. Number 8 is the 14-year-old who seen his 5-year-old sister killed. He protested CPS. Number 7 is the Casket Crusades. Number 6 is the immigrant speaking on the Trump ban. And number 5 is Judge Capers. Now, Judge Capers is, she was, I think, 105 years old. She was on the show, the Art McCoy University show. She was the oldest radio co-host in the country. Excuse me. I think she was the first female city council member. I don't know, definitely in Cleveland. I want to say the United States. This was in the 40s. So that's like what, 15 years before Emmett Till. She was, fighting the system then. And as a woman, when you had the Civil Rights Voting Act, we couldn't even really vote. So that right there tells you a lot, but she's very influential. Her service was very, very, very touching. As you'll see, the people that sung the performance, they were very good. And, it lacked a lot of media coverage that I thought it would have gotten. So, but that's number 5. I mean, we can say it can be number 1, but in terms of the actual video, me personally, I felt it was number 5. But as far as her contributions, it would be number 1 without a doubt. Number 4 is the Columbus Day protest. That was definitely the wildest. That video was shot in Little Italy in Cleveland. Little Italy is a neighborhood, of course, in Cleveland. Of course, Columbus being Italian. In the thumbnail of the video, that's a Christopher Columbus statue. When the protesters arrived in Little Italy, they were doing a ceremony at the statue, and there was like 2 black men in like I don't know, man. It was like, almost like a Pirate of the Caribbean outfit or something, and they had the hat with the fur on it that stick up and bayonet thing. I don't know, man. It was just, I don't know. It was like, black man, what are you doing? But that video, that's number 4, just because anyone that is from the Cleveland area and the significance of Little Italy, and how, racist it is, and it used to be and still is, obviously in the video, you'll see that it's just, black people couldn't even walk down there years ago, and it was just, you just got to watch the video. And you just see classic talking points that you hear most white supremacist mindset thinking come up with, like, well, what about the killing in Chicago? What about, this or that? I got called a nigger in the video. It's just, it was ridiculous. I think they were the most, like, I've done the police protest and, stuff with Tamir Rice, and they were the most hostile. The police was fine, but it was just the people during that protest. Number 3 is the daca interview that I did, or her talking about how her parents were deported. That was a very, very, she actually, well, no, I'm not going to mention that. But her story is very, very, it has to be told. And I know a lot of people were thinking like, well, you know, what do immigrants do for black people, or, you know, they don't really care about our issues, or, and that's not really true. And you can't really, we can't look like, okay, we don't want to be stereotyped as black people, but we can't stereotype other people because we feel that they're different, or we feel like we're not getting the support from them, even though, let's say, like out of 100, let's say maybe 5 out of 100 of the immigrants, you know, support and know about Black history. You can't, you just don't know. So, you know, she got up there, she talked about Malcolm X and I think the Black Panther. She read a poem, and there was, you know, different dreamers going up there and they're talking about their experience. And she just read her poem. She didn't get to talk about her experience. So I, you know, talked to her after the event, and I said, well, do you want to tell your story on camera? You didn't get a chance to speak. And she had the best, I mean, yes, everyone, they had their own situations, but hers was the most touching out of even the people that, you know, read it. So that video is significant because if I never would have spoke to her, I don't know if she would have gotten her story out. And the fact that everybody there didn't get to hear her story, I think makes it important. And she's just saying how her parents were both deported. She spent her legal fees, all her savings on legal fees, and she's just talking about her mother being in jail and, you know, just different things. So that's why that's the number 3 video, because I don't know, man, it's just a touching story. And we can't really look like, okay, well, they're immigrants, but they don't care about Black people. But because that's not true. There may be a lot of them, or you can say the majority of them don't, but there are some that do. And I think when we can't say we don't want to be stereotyped and then stereotype other people. And I'm not saying there's not truth to there being a disconnection between us and other groups. It exists, but to just stereotype all of them, I think that creates some kind of barrier of developing understanding. So number 2, but I mean, you got to think that's number 3. So it hasn't been a very good video, at least in my opinion. So just hear me out. I know, because I got a lot of comments, and a lot of people, they didn't. I don't know. I got some thumbs down on it, so I understand where people are coming from with that. But just hear them out. Number 2, this was really my number 1, but I have to be, I don't even know how to word it. But as far as the information, the number 2 video of the top 10 it's a prophecy from the 1940s on entertainment. And it's just the whole style and structure and what's being said in the video. You got to just watch it. I mean, it really makes you think about entertainment, especially, you know, because I'm of the belief, I think art is art, but if art is not uplifting, if art is not educating, if art is not really serving any real benefit, then what is the point? If it's not helping people, educating, advancing people, then what is the point? So, but that wasn't really what that was about in a way. That was saying that entertainment is basically, or leisure time is an excuse to forget about the trouble. So when we party on the weekend, all of these things we use as escapism. But I'm really not doing the video any justice because I'm reading from his, from what the gentleman said, and I'm not really doing it justice. So I just say, just watch the video and you'll get a better understanding, because I can't really put it into words as far as, that'll make you understand. But it'll just change your perception on entertainment. Number one is the Indisposable Democracy video with Devin Branch and East Cleveland People. And that video is number one on the top 10 because it's so many issues covered in that video that is not covered in mainstream media. It's not covered on, if you want to say, conscious channels or any channels, really, and it's real life. It's not gossip. It's a real life issue that affects Black communities. We're dealing with environmental racism. We're dealing with low voter turnouts. This thing just came out. The city of East Cleveland is the number one on the poverty list in Ohio. And we've got some of the most poor cities in the country. I think the child poverty rate is like almost 65% or something in East Cleveland. So, and these voter turnouts, you'll see in the video, it was like 8% voter turnout. So just the stuff in like Alabama, even though that was a state issue, you see the turnout, it was like 20-something%. 90% of the votes was for Black women, or 96% or 7, and 92% was the Black men. But that's like a miracle. Generally, in most Black cities, especially on a if it's like a local election, not like a presidential election, most people are not gonna vote. And it's just extremely difficult it's like the most important issues don't really matter to people. It's like the most important issues don't really matter. So that video is number one because of the issues being covered, because it's a real video, like it's documentary style video. It's affecting people's lives. Devin Branch, who's, he ran a great campaign. He tried his best, he tried his hardest, and it's the classic tale, like when you're trying to wake up people or whatever, because this is the thing, and I say this often, when you're doing like conscious work, quote unquote, like trying to wake people up in their history, and people have to be ready for that. But when you're doing stuff that affects the community, it affects the community. It doesn't just affect the people who are willing to listen in a way. Like, you have to be willing to listen to vote for someone. I understand that, but it's just different. Like if you're active in the community and different things, like you know what I'm saying, if you're in the communities and different things like that. So that's why that is number one, because it's like these are and it wasn't meant to be that. Well, I guess it was, but it's like, ironically, if you have the most underreported topics in the community, and it becomes a whole documentary, and these issues are not being reported, it's like people don't really care about it unless it's reported by the mainstream media. So that video, as I said, it deals with environmental racism and local politics. And, when you have a city where the voter turnout is less than 10%, like East Cleveland has 12,000 people, but only less than 2,000 people vote. So, but these are not popular issues. So when you're doing this, it's like the most popular issues, again, do not get the attention and coverage they deserve. And it's like, how do you really make something important relevant? Because if it's important, it's already relevant. But if people aren't paying attention to it, that doesn't mean it's not the most important. It just means it's not relevant to the people. So what does that tell you about the people? It tells you that, I don't know. I'm not trying to go off on a long tangent. I just feel like that's why the Indisposable Democracy documentary is number one, because it's in dealing with environmental racism, it's dealing with voting, and also the campaign he ran, people came together. It shows you that when they recalled the mayor, it shows you the power of local voting. That's another reason why it's number one, because local voting does matter, and that's proof in that documentary. So you can't watch that and say, well, local voting doesn't have an effect. So I know there's some people that might think, well, my vote doesn't count, or it doesn't matter, or it's going to be messed up anyway. Or if you don't like the system, you can change the system because you can vote. You can put who you want to put in. You can take them out. Then people say, well, we need money. We don't have money in the community. We want to put in who we want to put in. But you can put in people. You can take out the people who get voted in, who get money, who are having the money influencing them. So again, how much does it cost to organize people to vote someone out? You can do a recall election like they did and vote them out. It's really simple. So that's why that's number one. It's a lot of work, blood, sweat, and tears. And also him running for the Green Party. That's another reason. It's just so many instances in that documentary, leaving the Democrats, the majority of I don't want to bring up what you would say classic conservative talking points, but there's a lot of truth to it. A lot of black cities, are destroyed by Democrats that were in power. It's just the people. Now, I'm not talking about the history. We could talk about the history of the Democrats, like the KKK and different things like that. I'm just saying recently, also, they failed. At some point, you have to look at it like, okay, the police is not working. Crime keeps going up. I know they say crime is down. Crime is not down here. So here it's not working. And even if it's down, like, what is the bar for crime? Like, yes, you can say one person being murdered is too much, but what is the barometer? What is the measurement of crime? So again, the documentary is number one because the Democratic Party, it needs to be looked at objectively. And that film does that. It looks at the errors that they've made. It looks at the inconsistencies in government. And, it says, well, let's give the Green Party a try. The Green Party has 4 different principles: the ecology, I don't know it. I'm not in the Green Party, but I know it was the ecology, social justice, democracy, and I think there was one other thing. And like they said in the film, a lot of people don't know what the policies of the Democrats. What does the Democratic Party stand for? And we have in the black community, sometimes we just vote. We see, oh, well, here's a D. We're going to vote D on the ballot. We're going to just go and vote D all down the ballot. So it doesn't have to be popular. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to wait for the mainstream media to pick up on it. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to get a whole lot of attention or money behind it. People just have to be ready for it. As far as, new ways of seeing the community and how the news is portraying the community. So, and East Cleveland is $5 million in bankruptcy. And, so it's just so many levels. It's like, well, there's at a point basically where they don't really have anything to lose. And this film, it can be used. People are saying it. They're saying, in Baltimore, different things like that, but it should be used as, give people hope. Devin, it took a lot of courage to do what Devin did. It takes a lot of courage just to even run for office. And him running for office under a different party in a 99% black city, that's a revolutionary act in itself. And you're not going to really see that anywhere else. So that's the remaining top 10. Oh, it's 41 minutes. It's been a long time. So I see Kim is in here. I don't know if she's still here, but yeah, I'm tired of talking. I might come on later, but that's the top 10. I'm going to do a quick rundown of the top 10 that I just spoke the last 40 minutes about. So number 10 is the professional sports teams robbing the inner city. We paying taxes for the sports teams, but how much would you pay to keep them here is what I asked the people during the NBA finals. If you said less than what you pay for the taxes and annually, then you don't value the team as much. It's called a contingent evaluation method. You can use it to see how much you really value anything. The Facebook killer, that's number 9, spoke to the eyewitnesses of the Facebook killer. If you remember that shooting that took place. Number 8 is the 14-year-old who led the protest against his 5-year-old sister's death. He felt she was neglected by CPS, Children Protective Services. He led that protest at the Children Protective Services building. Number 7 is the Casket Crusades. Basically, the people from the Word Church led 3 back-to-back marches in Akron, East Cleveland, downtown Cleveland, just spreading the word of God and praying for people and calling an end to heroin addict, heroin and drug abuse, domestic violence, different things like that. Number 6, the immigrants speaking on the Trump ban. I spoke to 2 people from Somalia. They were refugees for over 30 years. I spoke to someone from the Council American Islamic Relations Group. Talked about the vetting process, the screening process of Muslims, how it's basically strict, and there's no need to even ban Muslims because to get into this country is like already a miracle based on the screening process. Number 5 is the Colin Kaepernick protest. As you see, you should just go to YouTube. I know it might be hard to access the videos on the Facebook channel, but there's a playlist for everything on the YouTube channel. And the Kaepernick protest is under racism in sports because every event is like the sports brings out the racism unlike anything else. So see that. Number 5 is Judge Capers. She was 104 years old when she passed. She was the first city council black woman in the city of Cleveland, maybe even the country, in the 40s. That's before the Civil Rights Act, the Civil Rights Voting Act, the Civil Rights Movement, before Emmett Till, all of that. So very, very influential woman. Number 4 is the Indigenous People protest on Columbus Day. We just got to watch that. We're in Little Italy. It's a historic Italian, known to be racist town in the city of Cleveland. And you have Native people and protesters, and they're trying to educate people on Christopher Columbus in Little Italy, and the people don't want to hear it. Nobody really disagreed with him. They just didn't want to hear it, or they thought it was just being too much. It was before a parade had started, so there's a lot of people in that video. Number 3 is a DACA Dreamer recipient, tells the story of how her parents was deported. That's a very emotional, in-depth video. She didn't really hold anything back, so that's why that's number 3. Number 2 is it's basically the number 2 video. I can't really do it any justice because it's really my number 1 video, but as far as the work and effort, number 1 has to be number 1 for that reason. But as far as philosophy and different things, perspective, number 2 is my favorite. But I try to be objective. Like, okay, as far as news, because that wasn't really a news video. So number 2 just talks about a really different perspective and probably original, and maybe, kind of like how we look at, like, when we see something new that comes out, like entertainment, like how when DVDs came out or when video games first came out, like the generation before video games came out, they probably looked at video games like, oh, and then we got cell phones. The generation before cell phones had the beepers, and I don't know, people just look at, so before all of this entertainment and technology got big, you have to think there's philosophers and, people that think a certain way that have a original perspective because it's being introduced. So it's kind of like a transition period where you see, like, okay, this is how we used to be. We didn't have any TVs or whatever, and because not everybody was like, oh, the movies is a great idea and this was great and different things like that. So it's you have to be a certain kind of person to really respect that video. Like, I'm just going to be honest. I know it's not for everybody, but it takes a certain kind of, to even understand what's being said in that video, it takes a certain kind of intelligence. I'm just going to be honest. Number 1 is Indisposable Democracy documentary. And as I said, rambled on for 10 minutes about it. It's a lot of issues in that video that's, unreported generally, like low voting turnouts, local elections. The only reason this election got a lot of coverage was because of Donald Trump and the fake abortion outcry stuff, and but it's not really. If Obama was still in office, you wouldn't even have really heard about it. I mean, let's just keep it a buck. Let's just be honest. You wouldn't have heard about what was going on in Alabama. Really, nobody really would have really paid any attention. But I will say that the mainstream media attention to the video led to possibly, the guy losing because it got coverage and people were like, hey, we got to show up. Hey, this is on us. There's a lot of attention on us. We got to make it look like, we care. Not saying that they didn't, but you don't want to, that's like an embarrassing moment if you lose that election to a certain extent. You know what I mean? So It's like I said, environmental racism, the voting, the Democrat issue, solving poverty. It's just that's why it's number one. So I'm almost an hour thirsty. Let me know what you think, and that's the top 10 videos.